Well, straight ahead this morning, Washington's latest shutdown fight isn't just about politics. It's also about your paycheck and your health plan. Find out what battle over one line in the Affordable Care Act could mean for millions of families. Also, if you find yourself again stuck on the perimeter, you're not alone. But GDOT says a new plan could finally put some drive back into your commute. We'll show you how coming up. And they say never, ever smile at an alligator. But one KSU grad student is getting up close for science. Wait till you hear what he's discovering about how these creatures could be adapting to our changing coastlines. All of that and much more coming up. This is The Take. It is now Friday. Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan Martin, filling in today for Chesley, and this is The Take, where we go beyond the headlines and look at why and how stories are impacting your community. Experts will share what they know, and we always like to have a little fun as well, especially on a Friday. Well, here's where the federal government shutdown now sits at day 17. The government shutdown will now extend into next week. We know that as senators are leaving Washington. Yesterday marked another failed attempt, the 10th time for senators to pass a funding bill, and they also rejected a separate military funding bill. A sign the Democrats are not willing to pass normal appropriations bills during the government shutdown. And House Speaker Mike Johnson also signaled that he might be willing to leave the House out of session indefinitely. Well, at the center of Washington's big budget stalemate, a fight over how much Americans pay for their health insurance. The enhanced tax credits under the Affordable Care Act are set to expire, which threatens to double premiums for millions of people. More than 20 million people rely on ACA subsidies to keep their health insurance affordable. And without the enhanced tax credits, average monthly premiums could jump from close to $900 to more than $1,900 next year. Congress must act soon as these enhanced tax credits disappear at the end of next year, right as open enrollment is getting started. But yesterday, leaders on both sides of the political aisle blamed the other for dragging their feet on this issue.
The American people are in a crisis in health care, and we are fighting for them. We are on their side. The American people are seeing that we are on their side, doing everything we can to get the Republicans to negotiate and address this crisis.
The Obamacare subsidy issue is not the issue of today. It is in a subsidy that expires December 31. We were always planning to continue the debate and discussion about that issue in October and November. Ironically, Democrats are taking the time off the clock for us to do that.
So let's break down this morning what's really at stake with Dr. Stephen Patrick, chair of Emory University's Department of Health Policy and Management. Great to have you on with us this Friday morning. Let's start with this. How significant are these ACA tax credits that we were just talking about to keeping health insurance affordable?
Well, they are significant for the people who receive them. And let's talk about who that is. We're talking primarily about people that are middle class. These are people who don't get insurance from their employer. They don't qualify for Medicaid or Medicare. And so they're getting subsidies to help them buy health insurance on the marketplace.
And that's important because, a lot of people, it's the affordability that we're talking about here. And how has the expansion of these credits under the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act actually changed who can afford health insurance now?
Well, it broadened the spectrum. It made it to where some folks with a little bit of higher income could be eligible for it. And it also made it to where folks who are in the lower income spectrum of things. One of the things we know is that different people in different places have different levels of eligibility. So, for example, looking at someone who makes a family who makes $75,000 a year in DeKalb County with a family of 4, what they're going to see is about a $200 a month increase in their premiums.
And that affects a lot of people who may already be on a tight budget. So we've heard a lot of back and forth, a lot of finger pointing from Republicans and Democrats. And so when they're arguing over the subsidies, some saying it costs too much, what do you feel might be missing from the conversations about the economic impact in particular and the health impacts as well?
Well, one thing that we know is that some of the estimates are between 2 and 4 million people will lose health insurance. And when people lose health insurance, they become sicker. They might, present to our emergency departments with undiagnosed cancer, whatever that might be. And we all pay for that. We pay for that in our premiums, and we pay for that in lives lost of our neighbors. One thing that I'm mindful of too is that before the Affordable Care Act, the policies we had were pretty bad. So one example, my parents were self-employed before the Affordable Care Act. My mom had a policy on the individual market that had things like lifetime caps on chemotherapy, which she hit when she got sick. So we had policies that were bad, they were not affordable. So what the subsidies have done have made better plans more affordable for more Americans.
All right, well, let's talk about Georgia in particular. Georgia's ACA marketplace has seen record enrollment when you're looking at the last 2 years. How much of it is tied directly to those expanded subsidies we're hearing about?
We know that people respond to incentives. When you make health insurance more affordable, people are going to sign up. And it's important that we get more people to sign up. The way health insurance works is, we want as many people in it as possible. And that's because we need a lot of healthy people to be able to balance the folks who might be sick. The thing is that, you and I, we don't know if we're going to get sick in the next year. So we have to sign up for health insurance so that we're all in the pool together. So the more people we have signed up for health insurance, the better that is for all of us.
It is. So if Washington, let's say, pulls back on these subsidies, if they did that today or tomorrow, could Georgia fill the gap on its own?
Well, that's a good question. I think many states would really struggle with this. We've seen over the last 7 months increased financial pressure placed on states from losing federal funds in various ways. And so I think states would really struggle to fill that gap. The other thing is that many states have to have balanced budgets. And so they have to find the money somewhere. And so when states are shifting around money, where does that come from? Does it come from schools? Does it come from elsewhere? So that's one of the challenges I think states like Georgia are finding themselves in.
And before you go, I do have to ask you this. We heard that this shutdown could continue perhaps until Thanksgiving. Let's hope it doesn't. But is there a compromise in the meantime, a solution perhaps between pulling the subsidies altogether and extending them at some point indefinitely?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think the current situation doesn't serve any of us well. The shutdown is having a devastating impact on many folks across the country. And also, we have a problem with affordability of health care. Certainly the subsidies highlight that. But we do need everyone to come together and come to a solution that opens the government and makes health insurance affordable for folks in Georgia and beyond.
All right, we'll see how this all plays out. Dr. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday. We appreciate your insight.
Great to be here.
All right, you are watching The Take. We've got a lot more coming up this morning. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Take, taking a look right now at the White House on this Friday, where President Trump will be meeting today with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. This comes a day after the president said he will meet again with Russian President Vladimir Putin in a push to end Russia's war on Ukraine. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr. Alice, always good to have you on. What are we expecting each side to bring to the table today during these meetings?
Well, it's important to note, for one thing, that Ukraine's president enters the White House today in a strengthened position with President Trump compared to some of their past meetings. The president posted just last month that with the support of Europe, he believes that Ukraine is in position to take back all of its territory from Russia. That is a major shift in rhetoric from the president, and the Ukrainians are hoping to turn it into real battleground backing. So the main thing that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is said to be seeking today is Tomahawk missile systems that can reach deep into Russia, could allow Ukraine to go on the offensive more forcefully against Russia. And he's going to make his case for why that's necessary. There's been some rumblings within the Trump administration of late that that is something that they might consider allowing. But President Trump was asked about this just yesterday, and he said, I don't know what we can do about that, about providing the Tomahawks. He said that this is something that America needs as well, and that he doesn't want to deplete this country's Tomahawk missile system, even though he acknowledged that there's quite a good stockpile to, provide those to Ukraine. So that's the main thing that Ukraine is coming in looking for. And then President Trump is just kind of wading back into these negotiations and trying to maybe come up with a foothold to try to get some progress on what has been an incredibly just deadlocked and deadly conflict for 3 years plus now. It
certainly has been. All right, let's talk, Alice, about Vladimir Putin. He certainly continues to be a thorn in President Trump's side. What are we hearing from Moscow this morning on today's talks in Washington?
So there has been a clear message from both President Putin and from other top Russian officials that any Tomahawk transfer, sale or transfer of any kind from the U.S. to Ukraine would significantly damage U.S.-Russia relations. They do not want to see that happen. Zelensky, for his part, said that he thinks that the threat, the very discussion of potentially having these weapons provided to Ukraine, is what forced Moscow back to the table to resume negotiations. And again, there was this meeting yesterday, or phone call yesterday, rather, between President Trump and Russian President Putin that President Trump said was very productive and that he hopes could be parlayed into another meeting and then ultimately kind of brokering some sort of agreement between the two sides as he just successfully managed to, broker that ceasefire in the Middle East.
Yeah, big news this week. So Alice, sticking overseas before you go, I understand you also have some new developments in the U.S. strikes on Venezuelan drug cartels. What are you learning about that?
Yeah, this is something we've been tracking as well. A lot of rapid developments. Just yesterday, there was another boat hit in the Caribbean Peninsula that the U.S. military struck, and the Trump administration is saying that this was a Venezuelan drug cartel boat that they hit, and this is at least the fifth time that this has happened. This is the first time that there were survivors left after one of these strikes on a boat in the Caribbean. And it comes amid word of the top U.S. military officer overseeing operations in the region abruptly retiring without any kind of public explanation as to why that's happening. Also this week, President Trump made the really stunning admission that he had authorized covert CIA operations inside Venezuela. Unusual for a president to comment about covert CIA operations, but again, just gives the broader picture that there is a lot of focus on Venezuela right now, militarily, operationally, CIA operationally, and it leaves some questions about where this is headed.
All right, Alice Barr, a lot happening as we head into this weekend. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Plenty more for you to come on this Friday. We'll be right back. This is The Take. Welcome back, everyone. Leaders across Metro Atlanta and across the nation are gearing up for No Kings protests set to take place tomorrow. The first protest, you might remember, happened back in June, and organizers say around 5 million Americans joined demonstrations against President Donald Trump and his policies. And one at Georgia State's Capitol drew thousands of protesters. The city of Atlanta says a permit has been issued for the event and that it has been working closely with organizers to ensure that it is safe and successful. DeKalb County Police also say they've been in contact with leaders about the protest to make sure things go smoothly tomorrow. So the last No Kings protest in DeKalb County was the only one in Metro Atlanta that ended with arrests. Officers say they arrested at least 8 people when they tried to move from the sidewalk into the road. But DeKalb County jail records showed close to 24 people may have actually been detained that day. Journalist Mario Guevara was also arrested while reporting on the protest. He was turned over to ICE and deported to El Salvador just earlier this month. With more on what we can expect on the law enforcement side, let's bring into the show someone we've seen before, Dr. Thaddeus Johnson. Always good to have you here, a Georgia State Assistant Professor of Criminal Justice and Criminology, who's also spent more than 2 decades in law enforcement. So it's great to have you on for your perspective as always. You were actually a part of our coverage last time these rallies took place. And so we're going to do it again tomorrow. How hopeful are you that there will be relative peace with these protests this time?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all for having me, and thank you for covering this important story. I'm very optimistic, always cautiously optimistic. Americans were upset. Everything's that seemed to be politicized, but at the end of the day, these protests have generally been peaceful. I'm very heartened to hear that the police have been working with organizers, and that's really the ground one, right? We have to facilitate this protected risk. Facilitate this protected speech, manage the risk, and isolate the crimes. It is not necessarily the viewpoint. So I'm very heartened to hear what's going on. And given the past, what happened in Atlanta, you're going to have some incidents. But think about these are happening across the nation, and it was relatively peaceful, not only in Atlanta, but across the nation. So I'm very optimistic. There are some concerning rhetoric calling these protests un-American that I think could be antagonistic. But I think there's going to be water under the bridge. So I'm very optimistic that things will go well tomorrow.
All right. And you have served in law enforcement, as we mentioned earlier. What do you think the biggest challenge is for police and different departments as they head into these rallies and demonstrations. Yes, they're working with some of the organizers, but you then have those agitators, if you will, that can come in and really disrupt things.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things that officers can do. And one thing is not put militarized equipment on and do what we saw back in 2020. That's not going to work. What you need to have plainclothes units, regular uniform units. And if you're talking about having for those lawbreakers or those troublemakers, you're going to have mobile arrest team. You're probably going to have drones. You have camera. You're going to have people in the field. So you're going to have massive amounts of intel. Now, mind you, policing is not an exact science. It's probable cause. It's putting evidence together. And so I did hear that you mentioned that several people were detained. Well, it's possible that people can be detained and then let go once you further investigate. That's how policing works. And so the one thing that we can't come in and be suppressive. We want to be precise. We want to root out those troublemakers so we not only protect our police, but particularly protect our protesters and our other citizens that may be along the route.
Yeah, you want everybody to be safe. And you know, Thaddeus, we saw the biggest concerns, I think, were in DeKalb County here in Metro Atlanta last time. That's where we saw the arrests and detainments. That's where also the tear gas was released. What lessons do you think police and even city leaders may have taken from what they saw happen there in DeKalb last time?
Yeah, absolutely. Organize, organize, organize. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Make sure that these messages and signals are sent out there, right? These organizers do a good job of helping with crowd control, right, and managing these things. And the one thing we want to do is not devolve into crowd control, keep it as crowd management. So I think the one thing that officers will learn perhaps not to escalate too quickly. It is stressful for the officers as well. But I think also perhaps the citizens have learned a lesson as well, is that if we listen to directives, that officers are not trying to be suppressive, that actually that is trying to keep the route safe, keep us safe, keep people on the sidewalks and keep the streets free. I think we're learning and growing as Americans on both sides. But the really big thing is working together, learning from these things and not overreacting, even perhaps training your officers for these events. I remember as an officer, I don't remember getting training in crowd management or crowd control. That's specialized training. That should be something for every officer, and that starts at the top down. So those are a few lessons that have been learned. And also, I think some things that's going forward is like we need to train, and this is going to be part of our democracy moving forward, always has been. So we have to be prepared to do this in a democratic and a peaceful manner and a precise manner, and not just in a way that appears to suppress people's freedom of speech.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal from everyone, even on both sides. Thaddeus Johnson, we always appreciate your perspective. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll have coverage, of course, of tomorrow's protests after the break with more. This is The Take. Stay with us. As we said just earlier, tomorrow's planned No Kings rallies are being seen as a coordinated national protest against what organizers call President Trump's authoritarian overreach. Events are planned in all 50 states, including multiple sites here in Metro Atlanta. Well, heading into the weekend, the Trump administration has been calling these protests lawless, while House Speaker Mike Johnson even called them anti-American. Organizers emphasize that it is a lawful right of people to protest peacefully and stand up for what they believe in.
There is nothing more American than saying that we don't have kings and exercising our right to peaceful protest. America doesn't have kings. That's our entire point. It is the classic authoritarian playbook. Threaten, smear, and lie. Scare people into submission. But we will not be intimidated. We will not be cowed. We will not bow down. These protests are peaceful, disciplined, and grounded in solidarity. That is what they fear, our unity, and we're going to show it on October 18th.
Well, joining us now for a counter view is Josh McCoon, chair of Georgia's Republican Party. Josh, I think you just heard what the organizer there said. I first want to get your reaction and welcome to The Take.
Thank you so much for having me. I couldn't disagree more strongly. These protests are really about distracting from President Trump winning for America. We've had an unprecedented first year of this administration, peace in the Middle East, incredible win on economic policy, and Democrats are desperate to distract that they shut the government down to slow this president's momentum. And that's really what they're about tomorrow.
You know, Josh, we're having a little trouble with your signal, but we can at least hear you there. I do want to ask you about this. Governor Kemp and your office have both called for calm with these demonstrations. Are you expecting unrest here in Atlanta? And do you believe our law enforcement, if we do see any problems, is adequately prepared?
Well, I certainly trust Georgia law enforcement to keep order. The problem when you have these hired rentals that show up for these protests is you find having people that want to cause problems. And so I believe that there will be law enforcement in place to hopefully make sure that this goes off in a safe manner. But again, this is really just a distraction from the Democrat shutdown of our federal government, which needs to end. Senator Ossoff and the Democrats need to put to an end, and they don't need engaging in this theater we're going to see tomorrow.
You mentioned Democrats, but my question here is, do you think there is any type of responsibility from political leaders on both sides to keep the peace? Because we will obviously see thousands, if not millions, of people protesting tomorrow.
So, I mean, there's been a lot of political, unpleasant rhetoric, responsible political rhetoric, and primarily from the left. I watched my friend Charlie Kirk killed live on television because of this sort of irresponsible rhetoric. To maintain composure in the political world. I don't think you're seeing that problem from the left.
All right, and you know, Josh, given, again, we're having a little trouble with your signal, but we appreciate you sticking with us. Given the scale of the rallies that we have seen nationwide, does it raise concern for any of the GOP, even here in Georgia, heading into the midterms next year?
Look, I think we're in a competitive state in Georgia. It was a competitive election last year. We elected a 100,000 vote majority. We know we're going to have to work hard and continue our trust of Georgia. Great candidates this year. The people of Georgia are going to want to keep the positive momentum we've had for Republican leadership.
All right, Josh McCoon there, chair of Georgia's Republican Party. Again, having a little trouble hearing you with the signal this morning, but we always appreciate Josh offering that perspective. Again, we have rallies planned here in Metro Atlanta tomorrow following the ones we saw in June, something we'll be following here on The Take and 11Alive News. We appreciate Josh for being here. And we were expecting to have the organizer of the Metro Atlanta rallies on with us, but they were unable to provide a representative in time for the show. So again, we will continue to follow the rallies today and tomorrow. We'll be right back with more on The Take. Stay with us. Also, as we've been mentioning all morning, the No Kings rallies have brought deep divide, not just for the nation, but across much of Metro Atlanta. For more context, let's bring in 11Alive's Zach Merchant, co-anchor of the Georgia Vote. So, Zach, we just heard from a lot of people about this weekend's rallies. We're expecting thousands of people here in Metro Atlanta. We saw that happen back in June. What do you expect to happen tomorrow?
I think it's a big question, right? And it's not just here in Metro Atlanta that these rallies are expected to happen. They're expected, according to organizers, to happen all across the country. We don't know how these are going to play out. It has been a season of demonstrations, of public protests, and really the latest. We've seen a lot of these moments over the last 3, 4, 5 years, and there's a long history of this in our country, of course. I think the one thing that I'll be watching for, and I think a lot of people on both sides of the political aisle and folks like myself who cover this, one thing that is notable now is that the federal government is playing a more visible role, some might argue, in everyday people's lives than in months and years prior. Right now, we're in the middle of this government shutdown, which we're going to talk about in a moment. There have been increased efforts to mobilize ICE in many cities across the country. Some people really support that. Some people really don't. There have been call-ups of National Guard troops into some American cities. And so when you have this dynamic of something that can sometimes feel a little abstract, the federal government now being more tangible in some people's lives, more visible, that can inspire more people to have more strong views, either in support or against. And we may see some of that perhaps draw some bigger crowds out tomorrow. It remains to be seen.
Yeah, you made a good point. We are right now in the middle of the government shutdown affecting so many people's lives. We don't know how long it will last, but we at least know that there won't be any resolution until sometime next week at the earliest.
You know, and you really put your finger right on it. I mean, the question at bottom, I think every regular person in America wants to know is, when is this thing going to end? When are we going to get to the end of this? And right now, Unclear.
Yeah.
And I think really emblematically of this, of course, we continue to talk with Georgia lawmakers. We continue to talk with folks in Washington, people here in the state. We've got a piece, we're reporting out right now that's going to air tonight. We're going to have more on it over the weekend. Most recent round of conversations with Georgia politicians, Republicans and Democrats. Republicans say that they want Democrats to pass this, they call it the clean CR, the continuing resolution so many people have heard so much about. It's the stopgap funding measure. Democrats want to see an extension of Affordable Care Act subsidies, more health care spending. Two camps really entrenched, a lot of gap in between them. We talked to a Republican in Congress and said, hey, is there anything you're willing to compromise on? And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but what he said was, hey, the CR is a compromise. We have already compromised. Asked a Democrat who was the chair, state party chair here in Georgia, said, hey, is there anything you're willing to compromise on? Democrats are willing to compromise on this health care proposal. And he said effectively, that is the compromise. Two parties say they've compromised and there's still this big gap.
Big gaps.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
All right, so something else we know you've been covering this week is a big endorsement when it comes to the Georgia governor's race.
Yeah, and it's sort of the tale of two Jasons right now. Jason Estevez, a former state senator and Democrat, he is one of about a half dozen significant candidates in this Democratic gubernatorial primary. He picked up the endorsement of Jason Carter. Jason Carter, of course, many Georgians will remember, many Georgians know him not just from his own time in state politics. He was a state legislator who ran for governor himself back in 2014. He's also the grandson of former President Jimmy Carter. Jason Carter endorsed Jason Estevez earlier this week. We asked him why, of course. He said that the two of them have been friends for a long time. He said he looks up to him as a father and the way he handles his family and looks after his community. But we also talked with Jason Carter about the year that he has been on. His family lost their patriarch in President Jimmy Carter. We asked him why he decided not to run for governor himself this year, because he was rumored to be a candidate. Jason Carter obviously now endorsing Jason Estevez. You can hear why he decided not to run coming up this weekend.
Yeah, but he also says he's not ruling out politics for the long run.
Not
which
ruling
I thought
it
was
out.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's rare to see him close the door entirely.
You never want to close the door. Well, Zach, we appreciate you. Always have the scoop. You can catch Zach Merchant and Faith Jesse each Sunday morning at 11 for the Georgia vote, also on 11Alive Plus. All right now, looking out on the east side perimeter on this sunny Friday morning at 9:35. This is 285 right there at Ponce. It is one of Atlanta's most familiar frustrations, crawling along the east side of the perimeter. If you've been, watching the minutes just tick on by. Now GDOT says relief may be on the horizon with a bold new plan to turn that stretch of I-285 into a faster, more reliable ride. Here now to talk more about that in the Eastside Express Lanes project is GDOT Communications Program Manager Kyle Collins. Kyle, happy Friday to you. Glad to have you here with us here on The Take. So for viewers who've heard about this for years, what exactly will the project do, the Eastside Express Lanes? What will it add, and where exactly are we talking about?
Right, so good morning. First off, we're talking about a 13-mile corridor in DeKalb County, roughly from Henderson Road at the north to Rainbow Drive to the south. We would potentially add two barrier-separated lanes in each direction of 285 to address that congestion, provide more reliable trip times, and also help with transit expansion in this very busy corridor of East Atlanta.
We know you guys have so many big projects that you focus on, but why did GDOT decide that this stretch of 285 was one of the big priorities to focus on?
Right, very similar. It's kind of express lane season. I know we were on the show a few weeks ago talking about what we're doing on the west side, which is a very similar solution to what we're proposing here and soliciting comment on. Really, it's a long-range plan to add these barrier-separated express lanes on the entirety of 285 on that top end from 20 on the west to 20 on the east. So this is just another section we're trying to accomplish.
A lot of work ahead. So how much is this project costing, and who's footing the bill here?
Right, so don't have an exact estimate right now. I know it would be billions with a B. It's a major undertaking to build something like this in a 13-mile corridor. And again, I want to remind folks we wouldn't be taking away any lanes that exist today, but it would be a public-private partnership delivery. So the risk and obviously the financing would be on a public private sector partner there. So that would allow us to use tax dollars in a lot of other ways in and around Metro Atlanta to make additional improvements.
So still some work to go. Where does the process stand right now? Where are we right now?
Right, so in the environmental process, that's what we're doing with the public information open house, which we're soliciting comment through November 20th. We've got several in-person opportunities to do that, as well as a virtual component, but tracking along to get that environmental document approved, we hope in that 2027 timeframe. Then past that point, we would continue on and hopefully getting teams on board to actually build out this section of roadway.
So you mentioned 2027. When could drivers realistically expect to be out there using the lanes? Would it be right after that?
Kind of what we're saying for these various sections, we're looking at about an 8 to 10 year window, kind of from once teams start to get on board and start building out section by section of when you would see some of these express lanes come online on the various areas from east to the top end to the west side.
I don't think anybody complains about anything in Atlanta that will ease traffic congestion, but how do you see these express lanes really changing the way that we all move around the city? And what do you want drivers to take away from the project as it is still being developed now?
Well, we'll definitely encourage them to check out the design files if you live in the footprint, see how you may be impacted. We want to hear positive or negative what you think about the proposed plan, but these express lanes are proven to work every place they've been installed. This is a more expansive express lane experience, not to mention, I think it gets lost in the conversation sometimes, is express lane transit, what we're doing partnering with MARTA, the registered van pools and transit providers, getting these lanes for zero charge. You just pay your normal fare that you would utilize to ride these various services. So building out the transit component, giving you that reliable option. And again, it's optional. We're not forcing you to get in the lanes. We think is going to pay dividends long-term for the Metro Atlanta driver experience.
Kyle, quickly before you go, anything we need to be on the lookout for this weekend in terms of road construction or projects in Atlanta?
Well, I think we're always busy, a lot of resurfacing. I know a lot of stuff's happening down on the connector way. We've got various closures, whether it's East Interchange, West Interchange. I think folks know we're busy trying to make improvements now, and this is just another mid to long range plan we have to add some barrels, but it's going to be a good thing long term to give you a more reliable commute.
All right, Kyle Collins, we appreciate you as always. Thanks so much for joining us on The Take.
Yeah, take care. Thank you.
All right, and if you would like to see what the Eastside Express Lanes that he was just talking about could mean for your neighborhood, check out one of 3 public information open houses that GDOT is hosting. You can see the dates and the locations right there on your screen. You can drop in anytime to ask questions. They also will show you the maps, and you can share your thoughts as well. We've got much more coming up this Friday. Stay right here. This is The Take. Welcome back, everyone. As the federal government shutdown grinds on, we are starting to see TikTok become its whisper network and performance stage. CNN's Caroline Woods is joining us live now from the NASDAQ market up in New York. Good morning.
Hey there. Good morning, Jonathan. Yes, federal workers impacted by the government shutdown are taking to TikTok in growing numbers. They're using it to chronicle their daily challenges as bank accounts shrink and to educate others about the situation. Many hope their videos will also help generate some much needed extra income as well. Their last official paycheck for the foreseeable future came this week. Roughly 1.4 million federal staffers have been furloughed or are now working without pay. The hashtag federal employees has gained thousands of posts in recent days. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is suing the Trump administration over its $100,000 H-1B worker visas. The chamber calls the new fee unlawful because it overrides key provisions of federal immigration law, primarily that fees must be based on processing costs incurred by the government. Commerce officials say the new fee makes the visas cost prohibitive for many startups, small and mid-sized companies. The visas are typically valid for 3 years and can be extended up to 6. They're capped at $65,000 annually, with an additional $20,000 for those with advanced degrees. Fees previously ranged from $2,000 to $5,000 per applicant, depending on the company's size. The newest must-have stainless steel tumblers for the holiday season come with star power, and get this, only cost $10. Dolly Parton holiday tumblers are now at Dollar General and come in 4 festive designs. They're adorned with messages like "Have a Holly Dolly Christmas." They resemble the more expensive Stanley tumblers in size and quality. Those cost an average of $45 though. To get one of the limited time 40-ounce Dolly tumblers, you have to visit a Dollar General store in person because the company isn't shipping them. Selections and volume vary by location, so if you want one, you better act fast. Taco Bell is bringing back a fan favorite with a spicy twist. The new Flamin' Hot grilled cheese burrito comes with traditional items like beef, cheeses, chipotle sauce, and sour cream, but it adds Fritos Flamin' Hot corn chips to it. The chips get their kick from red peppers, paprika, and garlic. You can get one today for a limited time for $5.49, or it comes as part of the Luxe Cravings box for $9. Also available now, several new menu items, including Frank's Red Hot Diablo sauce. It's described as a blend of Taco Bell's existing Diablo sauce with Frank's Red Hot Classic Buffalo flavor and spicy ranch. I've never been to Taco Bell. I know it's surprising, but I have to say that does sound good.
Yeah, it does. Hot and spicy. All right, Caroline Woods, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We have much more in store for you this morning on The Take, so stay right here. Welcome back. You know, it's not every day you hear about groundbreaking research that starts with catching an alligator, but that is exactly what one Kennesaw State graduate student is doing. Ben Angelet is diving deep into how these powerful reptiles may be adapting to saltwater as Georgia's coastlines are changing. So let's bring in Ben on this Friday to talk about what he's into and what he's discovering. Ben, so good to have you here on The Take. So you're studying something that most of us have never even heard of, I would say, tongue glands in these alligators. I got to ask you first, how did you come up with this and what sparked your curiosity about this?
Yeah, so while I grew up in Atlanta, I went to college on the coast of Georgia, and I also worked for Jekyll Island Authority, where we helped with routine alligator captures for various research purposes. And I started to develop questions because we saw alligators out in the ocean washing up on beaches, and I was always told that alligators were primarily freshwater animals. So during that time as park ranger on Jekyll Island, I just started to develop questions like, why are these alligators going into saltwater when we thought that they were primarily freshwater, and how are they doing this? Like, are they stressed out? Are they not?
All right, so I got to ask you this as well, because most of us are not science people, we're not biologists. What exactly do these glands do that you're going to be looking into?
So we have theories and we have good guesses, but we're not totally sure yet. That's the whole purpose of the study. So we know that crocodiles are able to use their tongue glands specifically for salt regulation and to get rid of excess salt water when they go into the ocean. That's why crocodiles can go into salt water for long periods of time. Alligators, we don't know that much about. We haven't really tested wild populations and seeing what those tongue glands are doing. Right now, they're theorized to just be able to secrete mucus to help for swallowing, prey items. But I think that they might have an extra capability to secrete that extra salt when they do go into salt water. So I'm testing coastal populations that are routinely exposing themselves to salt water, and then I'm also testing inland populations that have never seen salt water in their lifespan, and I'm trying to see if there are marked differences between their tongue gland capabilities.
All right, well, your research, Ben, also ties directly into climate change. Explain how rising sea levels and saltwater intrusion might affect Georgia's alligators that you're looking into.
Yeah, we have lots of coastal populations of alligators in Louisiana, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina that are all facing kind of an imminent threat of sea level rise, storm surges, all things that climate change can contribute to. And we really want to focus on the hatchlings because the hatchlings are the ones that are smaller and definitely can't deal with salt water as well as adults can. And when we get things like sea level rise and storm surges that are getting increasingly more powerful as the years go on, these things can, drop lots of salt water into freshwater habitats and freshwater nurseries that these hatchlings are in and can kill them. We've found thousands and thousands of hatchlings die from this saltwater intrusion. And we also want to know how really inland populations, like in the Okefenokee Swamp, they're experiencing saltwater intrusion too via mining activities from humans. It's starting to break some of the underground aquifers and start introducing saltwater.
And from Ben, in your research so far, are we seeing any signs already that these alligators, these animals, are adapting to saltier environments already?
Yeah, we definitely know one way that they're doing it, and they're doing it behaviorally. So coastal alligators can absolutely tell the difference between fresh and salt water. They know when they're in salt water and they will refuse to drink from it. They will make their way to fresh water if they can. Now, if you take an alligator from the Okefenokee Swamp, something that's never seen salt water in their life, and you drop them in salt water, they'll drink it readily, and then they could get really stressed or even die. So there's definitely a behavioral mechanism going on between these two groups of populations. But I just want to see if they're also utilizing their tongue glands as an extra means of osmoregulation or maintaining the salt content in their blood.
It's some extensive research that you're doing, and looking ahead, what do you hope your research leads to, either for conservation or for something you're doing for your own academic path?
Yeah, this could have really broad implications on alligator conservation, specifically for ones on the coast and inland populations as well. We need to know how these inland populations could fare when they do end up experiencing saltwater intrusion from human activities, human-induced climate change, things like that. Are we going to see a range expansion in alligators? We see that in the Everglades. Alligators are starting to move northward because the Everglades are becoming saltier and they can't handle those pressures. So we are starting to see alligators move, and just knowing where they move and how they're going to go about doing it can help with our conservation efforts.
And Ben, you're also a part of KSU's integrative biology program. How so far has the university supported the work that you're doing and the field research that goes along with it?
Kennesaw State University is an amazing school to go to. Right now, this kind of work is being done in the Department of Ecology and Evolution, and their group of professors and researchers are always imploring students to pursue their own interests and trying to work with them as best as they can to branch out to new facets of biology and make new break new ground. My PI, Dr. Nicholas Green, he primarily studies small mammals, but the scope of my research and my goals fit into how small mammals adapt to human impact and urbanization. So it all kind of fit into his stuff, and it's a great lab to be a part of and a great program as well.
Well, Ben, it's some great work that you're doing, and it's great to hear that you're being supported by KSU as well. We appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, we've got much more coming in for you this morning on this Friday. This is The Take. We'll be right back. Before we go today, my final take. Too often we cover violent crime involving our young men here in Atlanta. We talk about the problems, we share the stats, and we often hear from city leaders in a soundbite. But not often enough do we hear from the very people who need to be a part of the conversations. That's why I wanted to highlight an important event happening this weekend here in our city. It's called Saving Our Sons, aimed at sparking some real conversations about what young men need and how parents even can better reach them. So what makes this event different is that it's not a bunch of experts just sitting on a panel. This event will feature these young men, their mothers, therapists, having real unfiltered conversations. Now, we spoke to the founder this week. He told us one of the biggest problems is that a lot of parents just don't know how to parent this particular generation. And he says this event will help them. It'll allow them to have some real conversations that perhaps they're not having at home. So I'm hopeful that this event is one of many that we will see here in Atlanta. I know we've had others in the past, but we've got to keep these types of honest conversations going, because if one child feels heard, if one life is saved, then events like this are really all worth it. We hope you have a safe weekend. By the way, we'll have information on that event on our website. But again, it is happening tomorrow at Atlanta City Hall. We hope you have a great Friday, a great weekend ahead. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you back here for The Take on Monday.